So welcome back, everybody, or perhaps welcome for the first time if you're catching up with this event now. Effective training and cybersecurity in the new era of staff remotisation, in which we focus upon practical solutions, that's critical, useful tools, we've looked at some of those, and of course, interesting opportunities. My name is Katrina Sickle, and I have the privilege of navigating all of us through this second part of part one. So until 2:30. So we've got another dynamic keynote speech, and we have two dynamic round tables. So that is fantastic. And I will run those as I did the first one, like a very intellectually rigorous game show. That's what I call it. So since time is, of course, of the essence, we're going to jump into the first of those round tables, in which we explore specifically for SMEs opportunities for SMEs in Europe to improve their cyber resilience. Here are the four experts that will be joining me in a moment. We're going to welcome back John Davies. I hope you caught his keynote before the break, because it was fabulous, very instructive and colourful. We also have Peter Mayer. We also have Radu Rujan and Alexander Zorbowski. So we're going to meet those good people right now. So if you can remove our slide and I can ask those good people to turn on their cameras, that would be fantastic. Now, you all know the drill, and I think you were following this morning that I was having to crack the whip a little bit rapidly because there is so much fabulous stuff to say in a short time. So I have three questions, and when I come to each of you with the first, I will say a couple of words about you rather than all together now. So three questions for three short answers. John, because we know you, I'm going to come to you first. The focus is on SMEs. Can I just say that you yourself said that SMEs can have a very good approach to customizing training. It doesn't have to be a sheep dip approach. They are actually really well placed. And our first keynote, Steve Durbin, said that large organizations really should be thinking about helping the small ones. So in the light of those couple of quotes, in your experience, do you think that small and medium enterprises perceive cybersecurity as some kind of operational IT function rather than something that has to be very core to their digital strategy? Oh, I don't hear you. I need to hear you.
There you go. Yeah. So I think that is a major part of the problem, is that they believe that it's an IT issue, it's a technical issue, it's something that they have to rely on the carriers for the telecoms networks, etc. And it's really difficult to convince them that it's a HR issue, it's a personnel issue, it's a behavioral issue, it's a hygiene issue in terms of how people use their IT equipment. So it is, we do need a mindset shift, I think, to move people across into understanding that it's really no different from health and safety or fire safety. You don't play with matches in your waste paper bin, and you shouldn't be playing with email attachments in your email on your laptop. And I think the sooner we can get people to realize that it's just a general behavioral thing, so that everybody's got that level of awareness, I think it'll be a lot easier.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because I can't remember now, which I should, that the words we use, it needs to be standard. It's a standard approach. It needs to become much, much more standard as a training, as a subject in the curricula. So we need to have, you called it, a shift in mindset. If I might come to Peter now. Do we have Peter with us? Hang on, you can keep your camera on if you like. Hello, so Peter is IT security and public affairs expert at io.com. Now, this is a company, just briefly, Peter, I won't say a lot because I'm going to hand over to you. It builds products that help develop and sustain what's called a fair and open web. So I think that's very clear. And Peter is a member of the advisory council at the German tech company SoSafe Cybersecurity Awareness, but he was also project coordinator for the FP7 project Advanced Cyber Defense Center. So that was 2013 to 15, a few years back. So Peter, same question to you really. How are SMEs perceiving cybersecurity? Are they looking at it in the right way?
Yeah, I think the mindset really changed during the last years. You can see it, for example, that you get more and more CISO, ISO positions out there. Companies are looking for security consultants to implement ISMS solutions, for example. And I also think that the awareness is really rising just to public news. For example, you have media coverage on cyber attacks all the time long. You read about fines through GDPR violations. So I think companies know that security and also privacy, I always see them as a bundle, are getting more and more important also for business success. Because if you get hacked, you can run out of business, and companies start really understanding it. You also see that companies, especially SMEs, now learn about getting an ISO 27001 certification, for example. They go for cyber insurances where you get a security audit just to identify the weaknesses they have in their system. But on the other side, I also just look at the recent case of the Microsoft or Exchange vulnerability called Hafnium. The German National Assert contacted almost 50,000 companies across Germany that all had this vulnerability. They had a big campaign, they had a press conferences, press coverage and things like that. But 2 weeks later, still 10,000 companies didn't react. So technically spoken, 80% care, and probably it's still 20% that absolutely don't care at all.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. I mean, first of all, so that's interesting because I thought you were sounding much more positive than John, actually, and giving some very clear examples there where there has been a shift. But at the same time, it's one of those things that tend to be said a lot in political circles. There's a long way to go. I mean, there is a long way to go in that shift in thinking and a shift to doing. Let me come to Radu, if I may. Hello. Very welcome to you. You are R&D and project management consultant at APM. Is it an employers association? Is that?
Yes, we are an employers association, exactly.
Yeah. So you have worked for many, many years in support programs to SMEs, very much focusing on some of these key important areas like R&D, industrial development, technological entrepreneurship. And also you're an independent expert for the Research Executive Agency at the European Commission. So a little bit of a flavor on your background there before I ask you to kindly let me know, what are your thoughts? Where do SMEs sit in how they perceive cybersecurity?
Well, Katrina, you see the SME sector is a very heterogeneous one. Small businesses in the EU comprise around 99% of businesses, with micro businesses counting for about 93%. So from this point of view, it really depends on which SMEs we are talking about. But the truth is that most SMEs actually severely underestimate cybersecurity vulnerabilities. They underestimate the level, the risk they face. And maybe less than half spend actively on IT security, and half are unsure that they could even detect an attack. Mm-hmm. So yes, this creates escalating vulnerabilities like identity theft, like fraud. And the problem is that the small businesses are being encouraged to adopt e-commerce, to increase digitalization of processes, yet they lack resources in securing their cyber activity. Mm-hmm. And most of them in this context hope that they are flying under the radar, that they are protected by the sheer size of the sector and by the existence of a larger, more attractive prey.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Yeah, very, very interesting. So many interesting points there, and indeed with this in this age of e-commerce and the digital transformation in so many different areas, you know, it's almost like, oh my God, how do you say it? You're at risk of trying to shut the stable door after the horse has bolted, because you're not keeping a pace with that. So very interesting there. Okay, Alexander, I mean, you've got the advantage, Alexander Zorobowski, of coming last because you've heard what your peers have said. So you're a certified security management professional, CSMP, at Inbox Archive and Data Center. So that's very much about helping companies to store its storage services, professional records storage services for businesses.
Yeah, correct. It is a part, and we also have the electronic version of the documents and managing data for our customers. So pretty much we are touching bases with what we are speaking today.
Okay. And so you are working with all sorts of different customers on standardizing processes, encouraging security awareness, but you work with very, very diverse companies. So if you have to answer that same question, and hearing what everybody else has said, what do you say about SMEs and how they perceive cybersecurity?
Yeah, well, thank you. As the cybersecurity does not recognize borders, and it can be challenging from anywhere and any time, as in one of the fastest growing risks to the organizations from various nature, the awareness protection as well rises, and that's can be noticed. A lot of organization has been implementing technical measures to cyber protect them, thinking that that would do the job. But also they are missing a big part of the whole, which is the part that comes after you own the technical solution. Unfortunately, managing the biggest risk represented by the human factor is missing. You know, it's not just, we mentioned, it's not just the IT guy or department needs to take care of it. That perceiving is totally wrong, and companies, and that complicates the road for the things that meant to protect. It compromised, it opened back doors for uninvited guests. You know, there is measurements for how strong one protection can be, and it goes like, one system is strong as its weakest point. Yeah. You cannot expect your digital strategy that is safe if you don't pay attention to the weakest point into your whole system. Mm-hmm. You know, small, medium enterprises should change the approach to what they own and what they can buy with the money. It's totally different. Then you need to, they do not need to own the equipment or the resources for operating the, for operating the equipment. And it's not their main business to do it. They can just rent it. It's easier and have the benefit instead of investing tons of money. And after, when the IT guy left the company with the knowledge, what they're going to do, you know? Yeah. So here things can be more simple and better some cyber security with better cyber security outcome. I can give one simple example. It's okay. It is different how you look up or take care of your own child compared on having a child that has been given to you to look for some time. You know, I mean, it's a different approach and effort, and even if it's your own child. So I think so that concentrating on the main business of the SMEs should be their approach, and leave to the professional world to take care of the cybersecurity, but the awareness is on their side as well. So we are all in one.
Okay, so don't think in silos in your approach within your SMEs, because as you say, if one ups and leaves and your IT guys, then it's really got to be a shared awareness and also a shared ability to deal with all what those kinds of threats can represent. I'm just keeping my eye on the Q&A. I said to the audience that we wouldn't take them. There is something come in, but let me just, I'll see if we can squeeze in that question that's come in at the end. I'm just going to move on and come back to John there and say, you know, we talked at the beginning, and it's been said ad nauseum. We know this because I'm doing this now. I am literally working from home. I am not physically somewhere. So in your experience, do you think SMEs are adapting better 1 year on? They're still struggling? Does it depend on a mindset? Does it depend on an access to information? How do you see any kind of evolution over these 12 months in that managing this concept of working from anywhere?
I think an interesting statistic is, again, this is an area where SMEs actually win out over the larger corporations, because so many SMEs work from home anyway. And so managing directors, the management teams, you know, they will tend to be working all hours to keep the SME going and to build a small company up. So they'll always have their laptop at home with them. They'll be working on the sofa in the evening, annoying their wives and their husbands. And, you know, this is a different culture where you're dealing with SMEs as businesses. Now, that's a completely different question from, are they used to being secure when they work at home? So we've always been trying to help SMEs to be better secure working at home because they work at home a lot. I think, you know, some of the things that have happened in the last 12 months, you know, this shift towards these kind of platforms with Zoom, etc., has simply meant that we as professionals have had to offer out advice that is tool specific, it's platform specific. You know, we've stopped talking about generalities and generalizations about go and get a VPN in the hope that they'll understand what one of those is. And we've had to switch across to don't use Zoom. It's one of the most insecure platforms ever created by mankind. You know, it's this shift from general terms where we're trying to generally educate them in case they have a problem working from home to this is serious now because there's been a 70% increase in attack vectors on remote workers because of COVID, in which case now this becomes a very serious threat and a bigger threat than the corporates are facing, where they're still either working out of offices or even if they're at home, they've invested millions in private wide area networks, in VPNs, in closed networks, etc. And they dish out the kit to people to use. There's less using, using your own, bring your own device stuff. So I think SMEs have got a heads up here. They've got a bit of a head start in terms of how to work from home. We just have a bit of a harder job giving them the specifics of how to do that well.
So are you suggesting, therefore, John, that those are your last words and we should all now exit this platform pronto?
They've made some improvements. I think they spent a bit of money on it, so my personal choice is I wouldn't touch it with a barge pole still, but it's not as good as it's not as good for me as other platforms. But then our customers demand something a little bit more secure.
Okay, but I do grasp very much what you say. Listen, Kat, it's got to really move from a shift from that general awareness to something much more detailed now, and very also specific, because the landscape is changing so rapidly, as you say. It goes in phases, doesn't it? Zoom, everything. So how do you keep up with that as well when there is a general awareness, but it's not necessarily up to date? Let me come to you again, please, keep in the same order, if I may. I come to Peter and say, what's your thoughts? So John was saying, people know about working from home, but do they feel secure working from home? What do you have to say there?
I think my feeling is that everybody had to move to the home office from one week to another, and there was a lot of unclarity. I think Germany generally lacks in digitalization and also still has a culture of going to the office, and I still get questions like, are you still at home or are you working again? And that's really two different kind of pieces on the whole question. But also I think companies then, I think in the first weeks after everybody had to move home, I think spend a lot into tools like using Zoom with all the unclarity on privacy topics, is that safe? But I think what companies also really missed is to make people aware of working at home. Because when you work from home, you have no IT guys in the next office. People are now responsible for maintaining their computers, like installing updates, doing backups, having security, setting up VPN connections and things like that. They have to maintain their computer. And this is what people weren't taught after they had to move home in the first weeks. I think that improved quite a lot in the last month, especially. Right. Yeah. But and I also think that there's a big difference like from working from home and remote work, because remote work is not just taking the things you do in the office to your home place, but this is really a big difference, and people really had to learn that, and many people still struggle with that 1 year later.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's very interesting indeed. It's a different concept, working from home and remote working, and this big shift, which probably for many of us is going on for longer than we anticipated, however non-naive we have been about the progression of this pandemic. Radu, what are your thoughts on the same thing, this concept? Are SMEs struggling to adapt? What bits are they doing well with, less well? How do you think they're coping in this new digital sort of this very specific moment in history for the digital transformation?
Well, it's certainly a challenge to manage a remote workforce, and even one that is partially remote, but it can be just more challenging when you have to integrate and ensure that integrate processes from the distance and ensure that employees are productive, that they are engaged, that they are thriving, and on top of that, that information exchange is secure. And the transition to remote working means just that everything got a bit harder, including communicating and general personal interaction in a secure environment. So yes, to answer to these questions, put simply, the way we work is changing. It needs to be addressed with regard to our cybersecurity responsibilities. And I would emphasize that it's not necessarily the the technologies which are important. It's the human firewall, which is actually which needs to be much more used by the companies. It's basic personal responsibility towards common security issues. It's not a problem that you will, if you will get hacked, you will probably get hacked. It's how you get through the process, how you recover, how you continue, how you ensure continuity. And also very important for SMEs, SMEs in this context tended to adopt, let's say, out-of-the-box solutions, and also to put all the eggs in one basket. And I think it can be precautionary to move our eggs through different baskets, not to depend on one cloud provider or one technology provider.
Okay, that's very interesting. I love that. Are you a human? Oh my God, when I'm next in the world, when I can actually sit next to somebody physically at a dinner party and they ask me what I do, Radu, I am just going to lie and say I'm a human firewall. And they're going to ask me what I do. I love that. Up to now, I kind of tell people I'm a freelance biscuit designer, but I am now going to replace this with human firewall. I love that. And I do pick up your notice as move eggs, don't put them all in one basket. And again, I think that's something that's going to come out as a whole, as a message from this event. Thank you. Alexander, same question for a lovely, concise answer to you. Are SMEs struggling to adapt to this, whether you call it concept of working from home, remote working? How are they doing?
Yeah, it was a difficult change from our side that we have seen. And it definitely, the SMEs have been working so far. However, the process is still ongoing, and it would continue. Expecting that it would be finished soon is not realistic. In terms of numbers of raised attacks, it shows that it wasn't pretty much period compared with the numbers before the pandemic. More than twice is the difference, since individuals working from home do not enjoy for the same level of inherent protection measures from the working environment from the office. This has brought tons of work to the cyber attackers, discovering vulnerabilities of employees and also practicing as well. I mean, the pandemic has developed a very good test environment. Interesting fact, we also touched this one, but is with numbers like 500,000 people were affected with the cyber attackers through communication platforms. So a lot of names, passwords, emails, addresses have been selling forward. But this doesn't mean that all of them will be used for now. We will be witnessing also a post-COVID period for the cyber attackers based on well-prepared and finished homework from the attackers, So before the remotization era, and this is very good name that you have opened for this for today's talks, there was an adapting period for testing the known implementation of the solutions, So and also there has been numbers showing of 15% of difference that new types of cyber attacks during the pandemic. So the social criminals have been very precise in developing catch over phishing SMS. Yeah. So in the mean, the job to be done, some protection methods were the showstopper. Either unusable or by purpose bypassed. I mean, here's the example. If before the pandemic, remote allowance to the sensitive data was prohibited, now became the new normal. It became allowed. So the SMEs has not been sufficiently prepared for the strike of sophisticated cyber attacks, and this should, it needs to continuous progress the need of rise the cyber awareness, So.
Okay, but I thought you said some interesting, absolutely, the pandemic has introduced a true test environment, but again, a whole other conversation, but something to think about. It's not just about this period, it's about the post-COVID attacks and how it has enabled criminals to become more and more sophisticated at speed. So thank you very, very much. And sorry to cut in there, but I'm going to allow you time to to complete the answers to this last question to you and see if I can just have a look at the question that came in the Q&A. So the obvious thing is this project, CyberWiser, is part of Horizon 2020. We heard from the European Commission at the outset. Important always to say, when we think specifically about Europe and its particular role, what should it do to help SMEs in particular make progress in terms of digitalization, but cybersecurity in particular? Just one or two concrete recommendations, 3 if you can fit them into 90 seconds. So let me start with you, John. Thank you.
Yeah, I think a lot of this stuff is underway. The challenges, the standardization, which you've already mentioned, you know, and that's come out with a number of the speakers talking about the standardization. So, you know, the first one is probably a basic level of cyber hygiene, cyber awareness. And this needs to be driven out by governments as programs that can be offered up in a number of different ways, but the same material, the same content, so that nobody gets conflicting messages about what they should be doing, and push that out and certify it. You know, I actually set it out as we've got something in the UK called the Cyber Essentials Scheme. Every organization is asked to go and become compliant with it. It's not rocket science. It doesn't have a huge number of different controls. There's only 5 basic controls, but if every organization, if every small business had that in the UK, the whole environment would be a much safer environment. So the first one is a standard and certifiable session to push out, you know, something to push out. The second one is some kind of recognition in terms of the body of knowledge of cyber, because there's so many different variations, and we've seen it today in today's session. Actually, we've heard people who have developed this body of knowledge and said, here is our version of everything that is incorporated in cyber, which is fine, but if every country's got their own one of those, it's really not very helpful. And you know, we're just as bad in the UK. We've got something called CyBOC. So that I think needs some kind of a rationalization and some kind of collaboration over it. And then the third thing is easy places where people can go and ask questions, where it's non-threatening, it's non-technical too much, and they're welcome to come in, just ask a question. There's no silly questions, there's just dumb answers. And you know, we try and do that through clusters. I know there's an awful lot of people on the session today and working with CyberWiser and Cyberwatching that run clusters, which are open sessions for anyone to come along and ask a question. So I think those are probably my 3, to be fair. You know, 2 of those are governmental, and one of them is down to us to just form clusters and talk to each other more openly.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for being so clear and specific. That's what I need from all of you. So Peter, what should Europe do? What is it best placed to do? And what is its role to support SMEs, particularly in this area of cybersecurity?
I think in that regard, I would address a completely different point, because to me, it's not really the missing will to go for digitalization or cybersecurity, but I rather see that's a shortage of the people with the necessary skills. So from my side, I would actually see a kind of labor law glitch, because for us, it's really difficult to hire a person from Italy to work remote for a German company, or for somebody who's living in Spain but wants to work for a Polish company. There's so many things regulated in the US, in the EU, sorry, and but it's really difficult to get those people a permanent appointment and just instead hiring them as a freelancer. The other thing is that I think Europe still lacks really turning innovation into business. For example, look at CyberWiser, a great training platform, really well done after 2.5 years of the project. But at the end, it's really how to turn that into a business solution. And for me, it would be great if the European Commission would say, okay, we're the first customers of this project. We take this platform and going to train all people working for the European Commission or across all the other countries. So that would be a great funding for that project to keep it going on sustainable. Yeah. And the next thing what I really see is also that we're still missing the big European infrastructure tools. We don't have a European AWS. We don't have a European search engine, but with privacy and so on, Europe is really a safe harbor. To me, it's really a business changer, a huge competitive advantage. But at the end, we're all talking through Zoom, through Microsoft Teams, use Google, but no European solution. To me, it would be good to find a kind of European approach to compete on the global market.
That's very interesting. 3 very, very interesting points there. Thank you very, very much. And yes, I've heard that in terms of in other domains as well, in terms of not quite turning innovation into business opportunities. So I hope our audience from the European Commission is scribbling notes there, because I do know for these events they are genuinely in listening mode. So let's see. Thank you. And your comment also on the infrastructure there. Let me come to you, Radu, and then to Alexander for a lovely, concise answer. So what's the ask from you to Europe? What can it do better, or what can it do more of?
Well, actually, I think we should emphasize once again some steps taken by the EU. For example, in December, the Commission and the High Representative of the Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy have presented a new EU cybersecurity strategy, which aims actually to bolster Europe's collective resilience against cyber threats. And in this context, perhaps a good step would be to get an accurate picture of exactly what and which small businesses contribute to or are fundamental part of the critical infrastructure, which is focused by the NIS2 directive, the future NIS2 directives. And without this knowledge, how can we know where to focus our resources? Because, of course, SMEs employ around 100 million people. They account for more than half of Europe's GDP, but the role in terms of exposure to cyber threats can be differentiated, be much more efficient. Secondly, I think that we should be shifting from theoretical models, which are defined in the literature and which derive mainly from an academic and bureaucratic approach, to a practical, applied, and hands-on approach. That means that we should travel a bit the same road that maturity models, let's say in software development, have done towards agile approaches. We need an agile cybersecurity and cyber resilience approach. And it would be nice to see this done in parallel with some sort of a label, trust label, inexpensive to obtain trust label for cyber resilience, especially for SMEs.
Okay.
And I think what needs also to be done is that from looking for a top-down perspective and measures, to start from key actors, from industry leaders, and push cyber resilience down into the supply chain, while building capability from the SME side. Okay. When these two forces will meet, we will have a much better, let's say, prepared SME sector in terms of cyber resilience.
Thank you. Very, very interesting there. I like the word agile. And indeed, thank you for also flagging up, of course, the strategy, the new EU cybersecurity strategy, and interesting how you see that dynamic between the top down and the bottom up, and really pushing down into the supply chain from top level there in terms of cyber resilience. Alexander, you need to be beautifully concise. I'm going to have a quick look at the question that came in, and I say the same to you as a round off. What for you is Europe's role? What could it be doing more of, or what could it be doing?
I will totally agree first with Peter, and I will put up on that one. So I will say that maybe you don't need to be the main target. You might be the path to the target. So in that connotation, there is need of the education of wider scales. I would say that EU can develop an educational platform for kids and for young age. Let's say fifth graders, or for the first time when they come to a mobile device, or they can have a course in school or for cybersecurity awareness for their level. So let's start from there, for example, on that one. And secondly, from the country that I'm coming from, as we are young cyber country, and definitely with serious approach to establish the borders for defining cybersecurity outlines, our Ministry of Information Society and Administration has developed cyber strategy, and also we have, and this is very interesting that we have touched also in the beginning of today's session, we have established Cybersecurity Women Initiative in Macedonia. And I think so UE can be more supportive to facilitate that in a way for those to come up and to develop progressively. As also as discussed before, there will be a post-COVID period again for the non-return to the office. So maybe also here they can be supportive as well as for the awareness program for the SMEs to require and you know, again, I will see, and I will take away from my side will be raising awareness. I think so. We have the technology, we have more in their knowledge, but the raising awareness will be the main point.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think always, particularly on the first one, and I absolutely would agree, it needs to really start at the fundamentally, you know, the very earliest stage. What can be complicated, of course, in terms of competence that the EU has in education, that can be more complicated. But there, I think it really is the case of a framing and a guidance and guiding the ship and emphasizing it, because of course there is a little bit of a limit to what degree the intervention can be from the EU side. But that support you call in skills gains is absolutely noted. So I thank all of you. I'm afraid only one of you can answer this because we don't have time for more, but a question did come in, which was, maybe I'll just come back to John for ease, but don't be offended anybody else, and feel free to answer in the Q&A, anyone else who wants. Somebody has asked, I don't know who that somebody is because I didn't register the name, forgive me, who is that? Vlad Agri has said, listen, we've talked about protection, but not about recovery. And this is one of the key issues. Any two penneth, John, that you want to say then about recovery? You know, you're attacked. How do you foresee that? What are perhaps SMEs not thinking about in that side of things?
Yeah, actually, that's an amazing point, because I've seen so many of these standards that don't actually address the backup and restore capabilities. And if you've got all of your data backed up, nice and safe, backs up really regularly, and can very easily be restored, you're pretty much immune to most of these attacks, because even if these attacks happen, you simply roll back to a state that you were in prior to the attack, and you're off to the races again. So actually, Vlad's right. I agree with him 100%. And we know everything that we do, we've got to put that what if it does happen. I know Peter said this as well. It's going to happen, as Radu says. It's absolutely going to happen. It's not a question of if, it's when. And as Alexander has said a couple of times, you know, if we can't recover ourselves and restore ourselves after it's happened, you know, we're in bigger trouble than trying to prevent it. So I agree with Vlad. I think he's made a great point.
So thank you. I'm glad that I squeezed that in there. And thank you so much, Vlad, for that question. Such a big thank you to all of you. It is so clear the level of expertise and genius that you have in your respective domains, and you've managed to condense that and crystallize it for us in a very accessible way. So I do thank all of you. You are allowed to take your leave, take a breather, and do follow the rest of the event as your schedule permits. But very big thanks for joining us today. Thank you very much. And I'm going to give a reminder to the audience that don't forget to stay tuned for more discussions. There's, of course, you can comment on Twitter, Cyberwiser 2020. You've got @Cyberwiser. You can join the discussion on LinkedIn. So have a little bit of a forage around, ladies and gentlemen, if that's your thing to chat via social media. We would very much appreciate it. So I can ask all of these good gentlemen to switch off their cameras momentarily, because we are going to now come to the fourth and final keynote before we come to the third and final round table. So we've looked at all sorts of areas, ladies and gentlemen. We've looked at the current landscape, priorities from the EU, their initiatives and training programs. And here we now have a keynote on future needs and trends in cybersecurity training. Now, the gentleman who is going to deliver that is called Charlie Lewis, and he is cybersecurity expert, associate partner at McKinsey and Company, based in its Stamford office. So he very much specializes in the human side of digital risk, really helping organizations improve their organization and their governance in terms of cyber, and developing the talent to create organizations that can really respond to crises. I'm using the word we've heard already, effectively. So an interesting point, and I do want to raise this, and feel free to you can lose Charlie's screen there and we can both be together. Charlie served over 13 years in the US Army. So what's interesting from the perspective he's bringing to you, ladies and gentlemen, is that before leaving for the reserves, he developed the Army's cyber leadership education program. So was in charge of a very, very big 5,000 person training organization. So that gives you a little bit of a feel to the experience he brings to you today. So tell us a little bit about the future, Charlie, plugging some of those cybersecurity training gaps, a little bit on remote learning, and anything else you feel needs to be said. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you, Katrina, and thank you everyone for the time today. Very excited to be here and excited to talk about what is a very important topic, as we just heard from the previous panelists, and how to basically spread the wealth of cybersecurity education, training, and awareness, one within your own companies, from the security leadership and making sure they're prepared to do new technologies, down to the frontline workers and their specific roles, and understanding what it means to be cyber aware. And what I hope to cover with all of you over the next 10 minutes or so is really focusing on a set of priorities. One, about thinking, how do we prioritize developing skills that address emerging business needs, transition from on-prem to cloud? How are you shifting from waterfall to agile operations? Are we moving from one set of infrastructure to another, as well as critical business risks, to make sure you're addressing them, as we know that there are external dynamics as well affecting our cybersecurity operations. Next thing is really thinking about how do you understanding the talent gaps, the 4 million folks that we are short in terms of cybersecurity, understanding those talent gaps, where they fit, and finding ways to train individuals within your organization, finding those who want to learn, the specific types of problem solvers, those who have a cool background, and just making sure that they are ready to go so you can cross and upskill current talent, limiting the need to and the pressure on recruiting, but also making sure that you are creating these distinctive programs that focus on employee growth journeys and also allow for increased retention. Next thing we'll be talking about is really, how do you start to roll this out? How do you think about launching the organization and your training organization in one that highlights the business needs and risk reduction priorities, right? How do you get it so it's flavored not just, as I talked about, to security employees, but everyone, those native security employees, native tech employees, and those who just are uncomfortable with technology or who don't use it on a daily basis. And then finally, one of the most important things, and one of the impacts that we're seeing in terms of the decrease in in-person learning and the loss of the boot camps and those other types of training that we've had previously, is how do we go and build communities within the cybersecurity organization, within your company, through coaching, peer engagement, and cohorts that are aligned to skill transitions in these learning journeys to let your organization continue to move forward and succeed. So, we're about 1 year into the pandemic, or actually more than 1 year in the pandemic, and we're continuing to push, and there's a bit of a hybrid model that's going on right now. But what we've seen with this pandemic is that there is a major shift in the type of security environment in the IT environment. Most employees are on-prem, now they're working from home, or they're hybrid and they're going back and forth, which creates a set of different technology concerns, a set of different interactions. We see that there were slow transformations, and we were talking about it on the previous ones, where there were digital transformations. They might take 2, 3, 4 years. Now, suddenly there was a rapid transformation that required new controls across people, process, and technology, right? While also making sure you still have the legacy and the on-prem network so you can go in. Or as the question that was raised before, how do you make sure that you understand how to recover this new technology and still maintain your base? And then finally, threats have obviously continued to grow. Threats are not staying behind and letting the remote work environment affect them. They're becoming automated. There's UI, UX in the threat market. And so how do we prepare folks to understand what types of social engineering might be coming their way? How do we ensure that your workforce is trained and they understand specific risks? And how do they adapt and adjust? And so what we think is really important here is, one, while you had to build out new controls, whether it's increasing VPN, whether it's remote type working controls like Zoom, how do you secure these, improve social engineering training, MFA, et cetera, right? While you have new controls, you also need new sets of skills and roles within your organization that will address and require to address the new responsibilities that come out of, one, remote and hybrid work, and two, the transformations you're seeing. We also know that there needs to be an expansion of security skills from the security team to the non-security native professionals, those folks who aren't typically in security but are still working in technology, your developers, your project leaders, some of your other IT engineers. We also know that there needs to be an expansion of some additional skills to those folks who don't work in technology or security to make sure that they're aware. And then finally, there needs to be a continuous training. While in the United States, October is Cybersecurity Month, and that was when the posters would go up and everything would be there. It needs to be constant. There needs to be this reminder. We cannot allow the organization to just focus on cybersecurity awareness, and cybersecurity training while remote during just October or one specific month. And there should be continuous reminders, small little nudges. So as we go through and we think about the gap, right, we are very well aware that there is a 4 million person shortage in security roles. We just talked about it. And in the EU, unlike the US, where I can hire someone remote who's working in Maine, even though I might have a company in Arizona, right? In the EU, given the data localization requirements and the various regulatory requirements and time zones and language and other components, it is a little bit harder to have this remote work environment. So it requires to ensure that there is the proper way and proper thinking around upskilling, cross-skilling, and moving forward, especially when we see that almost 1/3 of all folks in security positions today are concerned about a lack of skills they may have or that they may see going forward, or a lack of skills that they see in their teams and those they work with. So to start thinking, one of the trends here is to anticipate the needs you're going to have, right? And as I talked about previously, you need to start targeting recruiting and development efforts that fill roles that protect the most value in the organization. You need to create a talent strategy, both one, in what roles do I need to have? How do I grow those? How do I develop and how do I retain them? And develop remote training opportunities that targets, one, critical business value and critical business risks. And by taking this business-backed, risk-based approach, you can start creating a prioritization matrix of what to hire, how to train, and why you need them, which one can justify the investment because we know that this is not cheap, right? But also ensures you as security leaders to have some level of comfort that you're bringing in the right talent at the right time for the right purpose. And then second, you can start leveraging training opportunities as a source of distinctiveness compared to others. We know that organizations, and when you start competing and you're competing for talent and it comes down to a salary, it is an impossible game to win. People will move because of salary, but what actually keeps people around is the types of problems they get to solve, the development that they get to see, and the opportunity they have to grow. And you can use this, and we see it effective in recruiting pitches, in gaining talent, and being able to demonstrate that security professional is not just there as a cost center to block and tackle threats, but to actually allow that organization to grow. And they want that person to grow and become a valuable contributing member. And so as we think holistically across the organization and we start pushing into those directions when it comes to security, it becomes very important that your talent strategy and your learning and that the trend now is that learning and development programs must be well integrated into the organization's HR, so they receive the same prioritization as those who create value, right? The value protectors must be seen in the same rate as those who create the value, right? And then therefore you can tie role cards, you can try skill journeys and all the various responsibilities to end-to-end learning journeys, right? That allow you to transform the capabilities, not just of the security and the technical controls in the process, but also of your people along business priorities, and can communicate that up to the executives. You can start creating a cohort approach. So you're developing entire levels of analysts and security engineers together. So they start to build this community and create a branding about what they're doing. They understand how to work together and they solve problems together. And they solve problems by learning from one another, which means they address vulnerabilities faster. You close critical gaps, in the right priority, and you're more effective. You don't have to come back and do more rework. And then finally, just being very well aware of career development and coming once we can come back in person, being able to communicate about your organization and the effectiveness that it has in terms of training and what it provides to you is also just sort of this cool way of recruiting and making sure you're filling your talent pipeline. And so, you know, as I get towards the end and being very mindful of where I sit in terms of the time on this, you know, we really see three phases overall here. And I'm going to run through them quickly. I'm going to talk about how you actually roll this out. And one of the trends is being very deliberate and clear on what you're moving. But one, obviously, as we talked about, you need to scout. You need to scout what skills you need to deliver to secure business priorities. Two, you have to shape and design your program, including role transitions and how you're going to move, as well as selected learning journeys based on what these risk reduction priorities are. And you can set them from a cyber perspective, but honestly, it would work really well if you integrate with a broader risk program across your business to understand what those priorities are. So you become a business leader and your training program is part of the business, not just part of cybersecurity. And then finally, you have to shift this, and you have to shift this training to be seamless. The delivery has to be rapid and agile and robust, and you have to execute it in a timeline that makes sense, that addresses the goals, and that is able to be consumed in a remote manner. And you want to do this across all types of cohorts, the natives, security natives, the tech folks, and the non-security, non-tech natives, in a way that allows for one, online boot camps that address specific skills, that you can prepare just-in-time training for new threats or new technologies that are about to roll out, and that you maintain that coaching, peer coaching, and that cohort mentality to build a specific community. And so as you go forward, what I ask that you do in conclusion is really want you to think about, one, a set of core principles that need to come forward around creating business buy-in with senior executives and management so they understand the value of what you're about to do and the investment you're making, and at the time that you want your team to dedicate, because your team should dedicate this during working hours, not during off hours. And eventually, knowing most cybersecurity professionals, they will do this on nights and weekends because this is what we like to do. Two, that everything that you build and you train for needs to be rooted in your operating model and tied to your services catalog, which should be tied to critical risk and business priorities. And that this will actually take time and significant resources, hence the business buy-in, right? And that it won't be a rapid rush, but nothing really is. You need to pull it together. And that you have to have dedicated personnel that are there to run this. This cannot be an ad hoc management of your skilling program. It is complex. It requires a disciplined infrastructure. It requires tracking. It requires tying into HR, your learning programs, and communicating with managers as well as those conducting the work to ensure that you can drive this skilling strategy. And then finally, just maintain that prioritization based off of where's the risk, what is the demand for the skills and the technology, how can I reach those folks and actually scale this across the organization, right? And how does this affect the business and how can the business buy in here? And by thinking through and taking a business approach, you can take in a resource constrained environment, in a remote environment, you can ensure that you're applying the right type of training, the right type of skills are being trained, and you can make it in a way that reduces risks, retains talent, and allows your security organization to be more effective in supporting your overall business needs and priorities.
Thank you. Oh, I'm on mute. Oh no, I'm not on mute. Thank you very much.
No, you're
and
good,
I think
Katrina. Thank you.
I'm good. Thank you. Absolutely fascinating stuff. And I think that what I particularly picked up, I mean, I pick up all sorts of things, but when you said, listen, that role within HR, but across the organization, I don't want to misquote you here, it's got to be seen as important as those that create more traditional value. You know, it's got to be standard. We've heard about that. That really stuck out for me there. And I guess you are a proponent, you would say, Charlie, you'd say, listen, it's no longer about the digitally savvy or the digitally native. It's about lifelong learning in a very, very complete sense, because everybody has to be that human firewall. So there's no longer this split necessarily between the technicals and the digitally savvies. It's a brave new world.
No, there isn't. And I think a couple of things. One, it's security professionals. We obviously provide a value to our business, but I actually believe at this time too, in the training and development side, there is a bit of societal impact. And I don't want to go on a high horse, security is great, right? But when you think about societal impact, every single time I run a phishing training, or every single time you go through and you develop an awareness campaign, you're not just protecting the business, you're not just identifying where those specific skills are within the business, but you're also training your team, your company to understand and recognize these risks that hit them on their Gmail, on their Hotmail, on their personal social media, so they can be very well aware of every type of threat, all of the social engineering that they may face, and some of the fraud that they could see within their digital banking accounts as well, especially since just about everything we do is remote now. So the training can, if done right, can really improve your organization's ability to just survive in a very threat-focused world when it comes to security threats.
Yeah. And also, as I clearly say, it can actually provide opportunities for people. Opportunities is what people want. If you train them up in the way that they like to learn, which we heard from John, then you actually can help to retain them, because it is giving them a skill set. And then they can become the multipliers for the business buy-in, which you also said was very critical to get it absolutely anchored across the board. It's fascinating stuff. You know as well as I, because you are the last of the keynotes, and I'm coming to the end of part one of this event. But thank you. I'm sorry I can't keep you with me to ask more questions, but absolutely fascinating stuff, and very, very useful to hear that, and some key ideas of what businesses really do need to be thinking about, and put the human into the technical of the cybersecurity domain. I think that's what very clearly came out for me. So thank you, Charlie Lewis. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you all. Thank you for the time.
Thank you very, very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are coming to nearly to the end, the twilight part of this first part of this one-day event. I've got one more roundtable to take you through, a few key message takeaways, and you're going to be going into some training, which is the complementary, the great thing that completes, as I said, this very content-rich puzzle. So this last roundtable, we are going to talk about training experience from the perspective of an SME. We're going to look at the needs, some of the expectations, and some of the outcomes. So let us have a look at who we've got. We've got Hani Banayotti, the Director of CyberSolace, Matteo Mazzei, and Paul Rovens. So I can ask those three fabulous gentlemen to switch on their cameras and keep them on all the time, because that's lovely, because if people are looking at us in the mosaic mode, they can see us on screen all the time. So if Matteo and Hani are good to switch on their cameras, that would be wonderful. Okay, so where am I? Here we go. Are we there? Are you with us, gentlemen, or you're just being very shy? Please, please, there you go. Paul, well, you're the best kid in school, but I don't know where Matteo and Hani are.
Sorry, I cannot help here.
You can't help me. Well, do you know what, Paul? Let's just chat then. Let's just chat. So let me say something just about you. There's Hani. Hello. Matteo, are you prepared to switch on your camera and show yourself?
Yes.
Go on, go on. Otherwise, you look like the...
I wasn't able before.
That's okay. Hello. I saw you earlier. You popped up, then you popped away. Right. So you know the deal, gentlemen. We're right at the end. People have got tired brains. You need to wake them, keep them really sparklingly stimulated. I have 3 questions, okay, for some delightful, concise answers. So I'll come in the order. I'll come to Hani first, then Paul, then Matteo. It's totally random. Let me just say for a moment, Hani, who you are. I said you were Director of CyberSolace. It's a cybersecurity advisory that is particularly focused on SMEs in the private sector. So you've got a lot of expertise across, well, consulting on cybersecurity, operations, incident management. We talked about that. That came up just previously, risk management. And you're working with a plethora of sectors: government, defense, media, energy, utilities, telecoms. So just to give people an idea of that. And let me ask the first question to you. This very much builds on what we've heard from previous speakers. Which staff members do you think need training the most in SMEs? It feels like a bit of a trick question given on what I've heard, but what do you bring? What's your viewpoint?
Thank you so much for the introduction, Katrina. That's a really good question, and I'll probably choose to be a little bit controversial on it. I think typically people would say it's the general business community or general staff members. I would probably elect to say that the people that need the most training, in fact, are the IT and the technology service delivery folks. And the reason I say that is often because we find through our experience in terms of incident response and breach response that we do, often it's the IT folks that tend to focus more on delivering functionality and far less on looking into security. And in their hands lays the keys to the kingdom. And it's rarely ever any other group within the organization that's able to protect and safeguard. And often we find it's the IT teams and the IT engineering community that tends to lack the security knowledge. Not just knowledge sometimes, but even the appetite, because in their remit, it's often about delivering business functionality and business service. Security is almost like health and safety. They don't need to care about it until they need to care about it. And often that is usually a late stage to be concerned. So yes, in summary, I would probably say it's the IT function that needs the heaviest focus on security.
That's very,
I was just going to add, as a final point, is generally everybody needs to be trained. Everybody needs to have some awareness, all the way from the investors to the CEO, all the way down to the caretaker.
And we heard about the whole supply chain. We heard a request for that, in the previous,
Absolutely. But if I were to pick on one group, I'd probably say it's IT. Often we find they're the most problematic and the ones.
Very interesting. Very interesting. You say it's also a mindset shift for them from functionality to security. And it's not just acquiring knowledge, it's stimulating their appetites. Very interesting. Okay, thank you so very much. Paul, he may share that view, he may have another view, who knows? Paul is digitalization advisor at UNISO, which is Belgium's largest association of entrepreneurs, SMEs, liberal professions. It's active in Flanders, it's active in Brussels. It has, more than 110,000 members. So Paul advises on all sorts of digital themes, and he implements digital practices, and he's very much into communicating and outreach to the members. So, from who you rub up against and from the services you offer, the people you meet, the companies that you work with, what do you think, which staff members and SMEs are most in need of training in cybersecurity?
Well, I have a more controversial answer, I think. I'm vice versa, Henny, because we consider that most SMEs, they do not have specific digital or technology skills in the house. So obviously, they do not have the specific cybersecurity skills in the house either. So those SMEs will rely most of their digital services on one or more external suppliers. It starts with the telco supplier for their connectivity of their devices, their smartphone, tablet, portable, printer, whatever is to be connected. Next, then you have the CRM, ERP supplier, which they have bought somewhere, or other applications, cloud software, mainstream of digitization of their business processes, so to say. And to get things really going, they mostly rely on one or other freelancer, IT freelancer, for an ad hoc time, or a small IT firm to get things integrated. So in respect of that, which should be recognized, is the most important training will be the training of at least one person, and also assumed to be a non-digital person, most likely the manager of the enterprise, to govern these relationships and the specifics around cybersecurity. I'm not calling him the CISO because that's for large corporations. I call him the security guard, or the security guard role. So he or she will need to get some supportive materials, checklists on how to govern the contracts with these outside providers. So to be secured that these services meet the security standards as well as the rules.
Yeah.
So to use them in a secured way, because he needs to tell the end users, so the employees. And in that guardrail, he should also be learned how to govern, to check that at regular interval. So in respect of courses like there are on financials for non-financial managers or HR for non-HR managers, I think we should first have an awareness training for these individuals, non-digital managers, or a kind of super user end user training, so that at least one person keeps an eye on.
Yeah, I mean, the way you describe it, indeed, it does not sound either particularly, it sounds very vulnerable and not streamlined in terms of the setup that you describe thus far. So you called it kind of a security guard to govern those contracts and to make it more streamlined and less vulnerable. Okay, I'm cracking on. As you know, as you have gathered from my remit is to keep things rocking. Matteo Mazzei, you are director of Axilia, which operates in the information security sector, very much related to, as I understand it, privacy, GDPR, the EU Network and Information Security Directive, we heard about that earlier, and of course the certifications, the ISO certifications, we heard about those. So you help identify and implement IT tools to support processes and procedures to help mitigate your clients' cybersecurity risks. So the first question goes to you. What do you agree? Do you disagree? What do you bring to the table? Who needs the most training in an SME?
Basically, I agree with my colleagues.
Can you put your volume up a little bit if you have any volume to put up? Don't worry.
I was saying, can you hear me now?
Better, much bits better. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I basically agree with them to have a practical approach. I would say that with the IT that has got very high privileges to work on appliances, and so when some of this account is compromised, the attacker can do a lot of damages. The other business unit that usually needs more security awareness is the administration one, because they manage money. And so they are the preferred targets of cybersecurity attacks.
Okay, that's interesting. That's interesting. Okay, you were nodding there, Hani. I was, yeah. Were you surprised at that answer? No, that's something you would.
Not at all. Not at all. And I completely agree with Nicolo. Is the administration or the business management side of things, mostly because, as he rightly said, they are targets. And yes, certainly I would add that to the list. But ultimately, I would say the technology guardians are the IT teams, and in their hands lies the last line of defense. And this is why I pick on them.
He just called you Nicolo, by the way, not Matteo, but I know you're Matteo.
Sorry,
but
Matteo.
But no, it's okay, because we do have a Nicolo. But
Nicolo just right below him, so I
know it's bizarre when we have these. No problem. Yeah. He may have disappeared and come back. Maybe perhaps gentlemen, I might gather the next two into one concise answer, because obviously I'd like to do a bit of trumpet blowing at the end for Europe. Let's have a look. Can you pinpoint one or two? Not a whole list, please, just in the interest of time, one or two strengths of cyber training offers in Europe. We've heard a plethora of different things going on in terms of funding, in terms of initiative, in terms of the Atlas, in terms of the pilots. And what do you think the weaknesses in the training are? We heard perhaps collaboration, streamlining, coherence, and how can we improve them? So let's group that together. Let me come to you, Hani, again and say, what do you blow the trumpet for Europe in cyber training, and where do you think it needs to be doing better? How could we make it better?
Sure. Personally, I don't think there are any weaknesses. I think there's a lot of good work happening in Europe, CyberWiser being a good example of that, amongst other that are being funded by the Horizon 2020 program. So in that regard, I don't think there are weaknesses. I think there's a lot of good effort being applied, and there are programs that are coming to fruition as we speak. I think the only bit that I can comment on in terms of improvement is that there might be a little bit of duplication in terms of the initiatives out there. And that's the only thing I would probably hold against some of the current programs. But overall, I think it's positive all the way through. I can't honestly pick on a gap or a vulnerability or a weakness in it. I think there's a lot of good work happening. I can only praise it.
Okay, good. And would you also, and I was just going to say, just to stay with you, do you think that relationship with what member states need to bring to the table and what Europe is bringing to the table is adequately understood, is exploited, is it collaborative? Because obviously member states have a key role to play here as well. What do you have any view on that?
Sure, and again, I'll have a very controversial view on that, Katrina. I think there's a lot of emphasis that the state needs to fix this as a problem. I disagree. I think we as a society and as a business community need to fix this. Now, there is no shortage of guidance. There is no shortage of standards out there in Europe, in member states, individually, in the general cybersecurity domain. I mean, the body of knowledge, the standards, the policies, the guidelines, they're all there. They've been existing for the last 25 years. I think it's the adoption and the business will to implement them and absorb them, for me, is the key problem. And that can only change through, first of all, a kind of a personal sense of mission that this is not just a technology problem, but a social problem as well, a socio-political problem even. And businesses have a responsibility to maintain like good ethical corporate governance, if you like. And the other part is accountability. I think if we are to begin to see things change, I think there needs to be a carrot and a stick model rather than having governments carry the heavy load or do the homework for the business community. I think there needs to be accountability. I think any company that's negligent needs to feel the pain. That, in my opinion, is one way to change behaviors, because I don't think there is any shortage of guidelines, of help, of knowledge, of standards.
Okay, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Any company that is negligent needs to feel the pain. Interesting
Absolutely.
quote there. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Let me come to you then, Paul, and say, where do you see the strengths in cyber security training offers in Europe, and do you see any particular gaps or weaknesses and have a suggestion? So just one or two would be fantastic. Thank you.
Well, I think Annie already summarized it pretty well, so I'm not going to add too much on it because I'm not so much aware of what really is happening on cybersecurity in Europe from a training perspective. I can speak for Belgium and for Flanders, where there is lots of attention to this most important subject. It's also being aligned with European instances. So, and as we are a federation who was helping members in first instance, we are not repairing the cybersecurity, making them aware. I think that's more than enough. I think in my earlier response, I feel the CEO, the manager of the enterprise, needs to get things done. He needs to be aware. He needs to be governing these things. That is not a weakness. I know it is there. I think it just needs to be emphasized. And the second thing is when I see most of the training materials or also scans. We have a scan out of one of the instances in Belgium, the Cybersecurity Center of Belgium. And it starts always with the question of having a website. Yeah, that's good. There's quite some things to be learned from some cybersecurity matter on there. But what I feel most is you need to look at all the devices. We're calling it the Internet of Things. Now, it are just those things which are increasing every day, and let alone if you ask a manager, a company owner, list me your your assets, your hardware assets, your software assets, it most likely you will not be able to turn it down. And particularly with the remote connections, where private assets also have come into the company architecture, those kind of things are not too much emphasized. It's not a weakness. I think it just, again, adds to be emphasized a bit more that every device will relate to a kind of security risk. And it's not to be maintained because there are patches to be done, and even on your smartphone, because also a company asset to be taken into account. And so that's where I would like to emphasize on that list, that hardware and software list of the materials in use for your digitalization is an important factor. And the website, of course, as part of that register, I would say.
Very interesting, and also more compellingly complex when we get this situation where it is indeed remote working, which is as we heard in the previous, not exactly the same as working from home, where we heard there from Peter when people say, when are you actually working? No, I am actually working from home. So absolutely the complexity of IoT and all of the risks that go with that. Thank you.
I just want to one little thing is on the cybersecurity insurance, because obviously there is insurance. Lots of banks are promoting that, and today every SME can be a victim to buying an insurance. But an insurance is just a piece of paper. You still need to do something, and so it can be a false assumption that if you're insured, that nothing is going to happen. I think that should certainly be acclimatized that it is not the case. You know, every insurance has a small letter. You need to do something, and that I would like to emphasize also.
It's a very good point to emphasize. Thank you for making it. Matteo, you get to round off here by telling, what do you think? What can you blow the trumpet for Europe in terms of cyber training, and do you see any gaps or weaknesses? And you say, Kat, if I could wave a magic wand, that's what I would do.
But I only can add two things.
We don't hear you so well again. Okay. You are beautifully soft-spoken, but we miss what you say.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Bit better.
Bit better. Okay.
You might need to sit quite close to the mic, but go ahead.
Okay. I was saying I would like to add only two things. The first is that it is a good thing we can find a lot of cybersecurity, an increase of cybersecurity training offers with platforms studied for this particular kind of purpose. The other thing, and it's not a good one, is that the approach is one size fits all, and so there is no personalization, and the courses and the training are one that could suit everyone, but these kind of courses cover only common issues, but not the specific and particular issues related to an organization.
So you think there is more scope for particular issues that would be for particular SMEs or for particular sectors? Because as we heard from Radu previously, SMEs, well, they might be 99% or the backbone of the EU economy, but they're not heterogeneous. So you say, Kat, there's not quite enough customized stuff out there for the needs and the complexity of the cyber landscape. Okay, and Hani, you agreed there, you were nodding. Yeah.
Completely, yeah. And I guess it plays to the point I mentioned earlier about my only criticism is duplication. I think there's a lot of duplication in the training and awareness programs that are available. So more people doing the same thing, which is, I think what Matteo was trying to say is that it's not customized specifically to the individual organization or to the specific needs of a given organization. And you know, there's an assumption that one size fits all. And this is where I personally found CyberWiser to be a very unique offering, especially at the very core of it, the cyber range concept, which takes us away from that kind of vanilla one size fits all approach.
Okay, poor vanilla, poor vanilla. It always gets it's a bit like brown, isn't it? It never gets a good name, does it? Even though vanilla ice cream is quite nice. Okay, well, thank you so much. Again, gentlemen, I could happily talk to you all day. I'm not allowed, but you've nicely segued there when talking about CyberWiser again, Hani, of the opportunities people have this afternoon to get some really good training. So thank you, Paul, Matteo, Hani, you've been fabulous. You have the hardest slot coming right last, and you have done yourselves and our audience proud. Thank you very much. You are allowed to take a break backstage and switch off your cameras and your mics. Thank you. So ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. We've got through pretty much all the content for this first part of the day. We're just going to recap a couple of issues. I don't want to go too much over time because I need to hand over to Niccolò very, very shortly. But as they say, cybersecurity enthusiasts, that is almost a wrap. There might be, I've got some key highlights myself, but I think that the organizers who have been also preparing some highlights behind the scenes might have something to show on slides. So first of all, a big thank you. That goes without saying, ladies and gentlemen, for participating. Let's see, have we got something else to share? There we go. Well, there we go. some of a recap that we had. At least half the people who registered did turn up, 43 countries. It would be great. So there was the kind of 1/3, 2/3 female to male ratio there, but you can see improving gender equality would increase EU GDP per capita to 9.6% by 2050. So we're very proud at this event of beating the 24% mark of women working today in cybersecurity. You can see, ladies and gentlemen, there a broad split of who we had joining us, but we know that it is so critical, and we talked about it, to get those the dynamic and the conversation and the collaboration between the academic side on the one hand and also between industry, but of course government as well. But we did hear that several times. We can flip to the next slide if you have it for us, please. There we go. Stay safe and stay safe digitally. So there we have a little bit of a look at the platform. The info. Oh, there we go. Okay, well, they were doing the thanks. I would have done that anyway, but that's really, really nice to have a recap. Me with a picture from, I think I look like it's the 1980s, ladies and gentlemen. It's not. It's only from about 7 years ago, but anyway, there you go. So a thank you anyway from me, the moderator, to all of the fantastic keynotes and speakers, and they did a cracking job at condensing their considerable brain power and expertise into a nanosecond of a heartbeat of output. Thank you so much to all of you, and let's see if we have, I think, a message from the Commission. So here we go, training and skills, cyber training and skills, never been more important. If you haven't got that message yet, ladies and gentlemen, from this event, you were certainly not paying attention at all and spending too much time on your phone. COVID-19 has accelerated the shift to digitalization and remote working. So of course there is a growing attack surface. We also heard that it's a pure test bed this period. And then we heard from Alexander there, don't forget the post-COVID time, because that's also, don't think it's all going to go away or suddenly get less. There are many practical options to train staff. You need to think about what staff really do need and to customize the training to the level that is out there, whether they like to learn visually, whether they like to learn from a peer, whether they like to lead, how they feel about their level of English and so on, if that is the training package being offered. So we heard a lot about that earlier from John. More opportunities are coming in Horizon Europe, funding with further advances of cybersecurity and building resilience across the European Union. So that's very critical, and please do bear that in mind. So trainers need to help people use the technology safely. Yeah, we did talk about rewards. We talked about that kind of gaming environment. They're very essential ingredients to any cyber training program. And social collaboration, it can be, of course, created online as well, but peer-to-peer learning can be critical when you've got interconnected trainees. SMEs, don't be afraid, you have an advantage in terms of personalizing courses. So don't miss that opportunity. Don't think it's all about the dark arts. Common terminology, simple slogans can be very, very helpful. The 4 EU pilot projects are building cyber competencies. They're real building blocks for a network for the vertical markets, and strong relationships are crucial to success training, but I think none of you would disagree with that. And filling skill gaps is about getting more young people and women involved. I think it is about storytelling, the plethora of opportunities. We heard there from David about marketing, about the legal aspects, about the social sciences. Charlie highlighted that these are opportunities for the staff in organizations. Please remove the notion that cybersecurity is only for the technical geeks, as I call them. You need to stay on for part 2. The one other thing I did want to talk about, also a couple of things I picked up in addition to those. Cyber range, it goes beyond the training. It's all about the testing, it's all about the evaluation, the capacity building, and the R&D. That was very, very critical. This demand for an interdisciplinary approach, very, very important in terms of to address the vulnerabilities that are brought about by pervasive connectivity and in this whole new world of IoT, the Internet of Things, and the trickiness there we heard from the projects in translating that into a kind of a curriculum, into an educational setting. There's a lot that needs to be thought about there. We looked a lot at the European tools, and we had a lot about, yes, there's awareness, but you can't have enough dissemination. These are real threats. So that is very, very critical. And then I also say, if anybody wants to find out more about those threats, our very first keynote speaker did talk about the Europol annual assessment. So that might be something to look at. So that's it from me. We can lose the PowerPoint now, and I can ask Nicolo to join me if he's there. It's so lovely to see you. Sorry to go over 10 minutes. Always difficult when there's the opening moderator time isn't quite built in, and also you've just had such brilliant speakers. Quite frankly, you've gathered fabulous people, Nicolo. What stood out for you from this first part of the day?
Yeah, so it was really interesting to have all these different perspectives, you know, on the cybersecurity training topics. Especially, I like you know, hearing from SMEs and the different local perspective that they have. So the difference in which they face, which they are addressing. I mean, this remotization era in which we are currently now, and we will continue to be on the post-COVID period. And I think there were some really interesting, really interesting perspectives that are definitely food for thoughts for everybody, I think. So.
Yeah. Really, really look, nice. Just as you go, look, I've just gone into darkness because that's it. My light is telling me to round off. I would urge people in the light of that, because I think so much interesting stuff and so many perspectives, but with many shared opinions, and then many really interesting, diverse perspectives have been shared. It is well worth people accessing the recording, I would say. And what would you say? I mean, I think to listen again.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say that this will be available after the event. So we will send a message to all the participants, obviously, with the slides that were presented, also the video recording that will be available on our website. So we'll stay in touch with you.
Okay, perfect. And what do you want to get out of this next bit? What would be a successful second part of the event for you, Nicolo?
So in the second part, basically, we will be taking a closer look at the cyberwiser.eu training path. So basically, we will guide the people to actually apply for testing the platform for free. So this is an opportunity for all of the attendees. You will be basically divided into small breakout rooms. And one of the cyberwiser.eu tutor, including me, obviously, will be directly speaking at you and helping you to create your own training path, which you can use, again, for free from here until September.
And they access those rooms via the lobby, do they? Via the
yes.
Yeah.
So
okay.
Now we will be closing this session. You can go on to the lobby and the lounge, and here you will find basically three networking.
First, we have another session, a webinar session.
You're right. You're right.
You're jumping ahead. You're so excited, Nicolo, that you just can't, you're not doing the next session. You're just getting people to jump into the training. Well, it sounds like there is a lot going on. So thank you very much, Nicolo, for taking this forward now. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your attention to the wonderful speakers. And of course, let's not forget the technical team who are behind the scenes, keeping the lights on, and everybody at home. As we say, I've learned so much, Nicolo. So that's always a privilege for a moderator. So thank you very much for having me today. And I wish you very, very good luck with CyberWiser going forwards. And of course, a very good rest of the day. So thank you. I will switch my camera and microphone off now.
Thanks to you, Katrina.
All right. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Katrina. We just want to remind everyone to exit out of this call and to join the next session through the auditorium, please.
Yeah, so please close this session, join the auditorium. We will be switching there so we can enter the the afternoon session. Thank you very much, guys.
Yes, and thank you, Katrina, for moderating. Yes, thank you.
That's my pleasure. That's my pleasure. It was very interesting. You had very good speakers, and they pretty much absolutely played ball in terms of the rapidity at which I'd asked them to respond. So that was absolutely great, because it's bloody hard to do that. It's bloody hard to do the less is more. So thank you to anyone still listening, and thank you to all of you. Okay, take good care. Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Bye.
Thanks for your message.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye. Bye.